Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. The next one comes from Christian Siebert. In response to PG-100 for the noob, I can't find the capture card for the D70. This was a mailbag I did in March 2021. And Christian writes, I'm tossing up getting a PG-10 for my D-110. But it would be more expensive than getting a second backup D-110 for when my current one ends up dying, hopefully still a few years ago. Why? Well, I've got to be honest and say, this stuff was built to last. The fact that we are still discussing synthesizers that are 30 years old now, they were never intended to last 30 years, I might add, but they were definitely built better than some of the stuff that's been built in the last 10 years. Anyway, he goes on to say, and with Patchbase app on my iPad, I sort of don't see the point. Yes, okay. I had to read this several times before I commented. The first thing is, I'm not sure what you want. So the PG-10 is a programmer, okay? It doesn't hold any patches. You send the patch to the PG-10 when you want to modify it, or you send a blank patch to the PG-10 and then you create a sound using the PG-10. It's not a librarian. And I think a number of comments I've had over probably the last year, 18 months, where people have been referring to the PG-1000 or the PG-10 or the 800 or the 200 or whatever it happens to be, as in terms of a librarian, which they are not. They are not librarians. They are programmers, and they have no library patch capability. And if what you're trying to do is develop a sound, then using a programmer is a very simple way of doing it, because if you use a programmer, effectively what you're doing is you've got a bunch of sliders and knobs, and you're able to sort of like change the values very quickly without having to dive through a series of menus. And that's half the problem with these 80s synths, is that you can do everything from the menu screen. Okay, so don't get me wrong on that. You can do everything from the menu screen. It's just that you keep having to go back and up and down and round every time you want to change a parameter. Whereas the programmers give you all those parameters in front of you, and you can just dum, dum, dum. It's very, very simple. Makes life a lot easier in terms of programming sounds up. And then you can use some sort of librarian once you've got the patch tweaked to how you want it to sound, and then you back it up using a librarian for restore at a later date. So what I wasn't sure from Christian's comment was whether he was trying to do programming or patch management, and it was very and unfortunately, despite me sending him an answer, he never responded back. I don't think he responded back anyway. No, can't say that. Now, the advantage of the PG-10, of course, is that you plug it into the back of the keyboard and it almost operates real time. So you can tweak and tweak for your heart's desire, until you get it right. As opposed to the offline editors, and this is the other thing about offline editors, you keep having to transfer the patch forward and back. Some of them will work real time, but most of them are kind of offline style. You design your patch and then you send it to the synthesizer, and if you don't like it, then you change your patch and you send it again. Whereas the Roland PG editors are real time. They work real time. So the moment you made a change on the PG, the changes on the synth, and you can play it real time and make sure that you're happy about it. I was very confused about the comment about buying a second-hand D10. as opposed to a PG-10, because they kind of do different things, if you get my drift. You know, the D10 is the synthesizer, the PG-10 is the programmer. So having a second D10 doesn't seem like an awful lot of sense to me. But if what you're trying to do is you know, have a backup, then buying a second D110 is a great idea. And if you have got space, you know, what I would turn around and say is actually, instead of buying a second-hand D110, why don't you buy a second-hand D20? Because that's a far better keyboard. Same architecture as the D110. It's the keyboard version. Actually, no, he did respond. Tell a lie, he did respond. I'm looking down here, I can't read my own handwriting. So just on that second D10, meant to be, what I meant is I like it so much that I thought about getting a second one to have in case my first one stopped working completely. It makes more sense. And yes, it's patch based, it's suitable for real-time playing. E.g. you can't use it while playing on the D110 in the same way that you might be able to twist knobs on an analog synth while playing it, so the PG-10. But you can tweak sounds and then press a button and it uploads the sound. But I don't need it to be real-time tweaking sounds, so the PG-10 is quite expensive, if that's the only advantage it provides. I hope this clarifies things. Yeah, I mean, the the PG programmers were expensive. I mean, they weren't massively expensive, but it was another, you know, if you bought a £1,400 synthesizer, you would be spending another £250 on the programmer if that's what you wanted. I mean, quite easily with these synthesizers back in the day, by the time you bought all the accessories that you wanted to, you know, you bought a pedal and you bought the factory restore card and you bought the programmer and you bought the whatever it happened to be, you know, you could quite easily spend in as much again on the accessories as you spent on the original synthesizer. I know that to my cost, because one of the things I do, and I've said this many times on the channel, one of the things I do when I buy a synthesizer is I always buy a hard case, and I'm looking at a hard case that's sitting there at the moment. So if the synthesizer doesn't come with a hard case, then I will buy a hard case. If the synthesizer has come with a hard case, and I've got a number of old hard cases, sort of the old vinyl wrapped cases, which was the sort of how cases were back in the 80s and 90s. You didn't get these sort of aluminium cases; they were far too posh. But what you did was you got, or you knew somebody who could knock you up a vinyl case. And there used to be a guy called Keith, and he had a little shop, and he had a mate that knocked up cases. So if a synthesizer turned up and you didn't have a case for it, what you did was you took your synth round down to Keith and he measured it all up, and then his mate would knock up one of these vinyl wrapped cases, which was little more than, you know, plywood, a plywood box with hinges on it, and then foam and the fluffy stuff. I can't think what it is, the fluffy fur in some ridiculous colour, either electric blue or bright pink or bright red, or you never ever got one of those with a sort of dull furry colour. It always was a bright colour. But but he used to do that, you know. He used to be out going, and he, I can't remember for the life of me, I can't remember how much he charged back then. But you know, he would knock you up a case in a couple of days for your synth, and then, you know, you went round, you arrived back and you went down there with your synth, and if it fitted, you paid them the money and you had your case. So, I mean, the bottom line with the programmers at the moment is they're not horrendously expensive on the second-hand market, and it's horses for courses, I suppose, is where I'm probably trying to sort of take this tail end to the question. It's a simple way of programming the synth. You don't need, do need one of these. Actually, funny enough, I've got one of these sitting behind me, which is a MIDI merge unit if you're going to do it properly. Not expensive, £20 that was, I think, when I bought it. I mean, I've got far more expensive mergers in the racks, but just for programming up a synth using a programmer. Definitely on the D series. On the earlier ones, the earlier synths actually had a dedicated programmer port on the back. So if you looked at the JX8P and the 3 and the JX3P, both of those had dedicated ports on the back for the programmer, so you didn't use MIDI. The D series used MIDI, and that's why you need one of those merge units, because you need to be able to merge the signal coming into the box, otherwise you can't control the synthesizer. Now you might not want to control the synthesizer, to be honest, but if you do, if you want to put it into some sort of MIDI rack, rig, whatever you want to call it, you need one of those. So okay, I suppose where I'm going, horses for courses, they're not expensive. There's not as many of them on the market as you might think, but they do come up fairly regularly on the second-hand portals. So if you want to get into programming your own synth, have a go. If you don't like it, you can always knock it on.